The night of May 25, 2020, in Minneapolis, did not begin as a moment that the world expected would become a defining chapter in modern history, but what unfolded outside a small convenience store would ripple across continents, ignite protests in dozens of countries, and force an entire nation to confront uncomfortable truths about policing, justice, and race.
Before the story drew worldwide attention, it began as a local event that would soon become part of a much larger public conversation.
He was a 46-year-old man, described by those who knew him as gentle, deeply spiritual, and trying to rebuild his life after past struggles. And on that evening, a routine call about a suspected counterfeit $20 bill brought police officers to the scene. Among those present was a police officer whose actions during the incident would later receive extensive public attention through widely circulated footage,
and would later be dissected in courtrooms, newsrooms, and living rooms around the world. As the officers approached Floyd,
witness accounts later described a tense and confusing scene, with growing concern visible among the people nearby as the encounter continued, and expressing fear. What followed escalated in a way that few could have predicted, but millions would soon witness.
As the encounter continued, video footage of the incident captured the attention of bystanders and would later become central to widespread public discussion.
Several officers remained at the scene as bystanders watched and reacted to the unfolding situation, creating an atmosphere that many later described as tense and unsettling. As the incident continued, the growing distress visible in the footage became a major focus of public reaction and later discussion, and the bystanders, increasingly alarmed, began recording, their voices rising with urgency,
creating footage that would later become one of the most widely viewed and emotionally charged videos in modern history.
What made this moment uniquely powerful and deeply disturbing was not only the act itself, but its duration. The sense that there was time to reconsider, to stop, to show restraint, and yet it continued, uninterrupted.
As the incident came to an end, the event quickly became the subject of intense public attention, official review, and widespread national discussion.
Within hours, the video began spreading across social media platforms, and as millions watched, the reaction was immediate and visceral, with anger, grief, and disbelief converging into a collective demand for accountability. And the question that echoed across the United States was not just what happened, but how it could happen in full view, in broad daylight, with witnesses pleading for mercy. The case quickly moved beyond a local tragedy and became a national crisis, drawing statements from political leaders and civil rights organizations.
While protests erupted first in Minneapolis and then across major cities like New York City, Los Angeles, and Chicago,
before spreading internationally to places like London and Paris. These protests were not solely about one incident, but were fueled by a long history of grievances related to policing and systemic inequality, with Floyd's death acting as a catalyst. The incident intensified ongoing public conversations across the country, and certain words heard in widely shared footage
connecting past and present in a way that underscored the persistence of the problem. And meanwhile, the legal process began to unfold.
Within days, the case saw major legal developments as authorities announced formal charges, and the situation continued drawing intense national attention to second-degree unintentional murder, while the other officers faced charges of aiding and abetting, signaling that prosecutors intended to pursue accountability. Public discussion surrounding the case soon expanded beyond one individual, as broader questions about responsibility and accountability became central to the national conversation.
Became one of the most closely watched legal proceedings in recent history, with live broadcasts allowing the public to follow every moment.
From opening statements to witness testimonies, and the prosecution's case relied heavily on the video evidence, as well as expert testimony that argued Floyd's death was caused by asphyxia due to the restraint, while the defense attempted to shift attention to Floyd's health and the presence of substances in his system, creating a legal battle that hinged on causation, intent, and use of force standards. Key witnesses included medical experts, police trainers, and bystanders, including a young woman who recorded the video, whose testimony conveyed from
the emotional weight of the moment and the lasting impact it had on those who witnessed it, while senior officers testified.
During the trial, testimony about official procedures and professional standards became a significant focus of the courtroom proceedings and reinforced the prosecution's narrative of excessive force. As the trial progressed, tension built not only in the courtroom, but across the country, with many fearing unrest depending on the outcome, And when the verdict was finally delivered on April 20, 2021,
When the verdict was announced, reactions across the country reflected the emotional weight and significance the case had carried for many people.
for many people, the outcome became part of a broader national conversation about responsibility, public trust, and the role of law enforcement. To 22 and a half years in prison, a significant sentence that underscored the seriousness of the crime, while the other officers faced their own trials and convictions on federal and state charges, further extending the legal consequences of that night. Beyond the courtroom, the impact of the George Floyd case extended into policy discussions, corporate responses, and cultural shift.
As institutions across the United States and beyond began reevaluating practices related to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
While lawmakers proposed reforms aimed at addressing police accountability, including measures such as banning chokeholds and increasing transparency and revising qualified immunity doctrines, though progress on these fronts has been uneven and often contentious. The case also intensified debates about the role of policing in society, with some advocating for reimagining public safety through alternative approaches, while others emphasized the need for reform within existing structures, creating a complex and often polarized discourse that continues to evolve.
At the same time, the human story at the center of the case continued to resonate deeply with many people across the country.
Speaking at public events and engaging with political leaders, ensuring that his name was not reduced to a statistic. At its center, the story continued to carry deep emotional significance for many people, and public memorial became a place of remembrance and reflection. Visited by people from around the world, the global response highlighted the interconnectedness of social justice movements, as protests and discussions in other countries addressed their own histories and issues related to race and policing, demonstrating that while the incident occurred in the United States, its implications resonated far beyond its borders.
Media coverage played a significant role in shaping public perception, with continuous reporting, analysis, and commentary that examined the case.
But also its broader context, and documentaries, books, and investigative pieces sought to provide deeper understanding, while social media amplified voices that might otherwise have been marginalized, creating a dynamic and sometimes chaotic information landscape. Amid all the attention, there were also moments of introspection, as individuals and communities grappled with difficult questions about bias, privilege, and responsibility, and organizations across various sectors, from education to business, initiated conversations aimed at addressing these issues, though the effectiveness and sincerity of such efforts have been subjects of ongoing debate. As time has passed,
The George Floyd case remains a reference point in discussions about justice and reform, a moment that exposed vulnerabilities and possibilities
within the system, and while some changes have been implemented, many of the underlying challenges persist, reminding observers the path toward meaningful and lasting reform is complex and requires sustained effort. The legacy of that night in Minneapolis. The broader public conversation surrounding the events continues to evolve, shaped by ongoing discussions, policy debates, and social change across the country. Powerful reaction, symbolizing not only a tragic loss, but also a turning point that compelled millions to pay attention, to question, and, in many cases, to demand change, ensuring that the events of May 25, 2020 are not forgotten but remain a critical part of the ongoing narrative about crime, justice, and the pursuit of equality in the United States and beyond.